Good day, folks. I'm in the Scottish borders today. I'm in the Royal Borough of Selkirk, and I'm going to show you some of the points of interest, historical interest. Selkirk's a small town, but it has a rich historical time map. It goes back a long time. We'll start off here at Sir Walter Scott's monument. Behind him is the town hall. We'll speak a bit more about that shortly. In August 1839, in proud and affectionate remembrance of Sir Walter Scott, Baronet Sheriff of this county from 1800 to 1832. That's quite an impressive monument. Now on the pavement here, I'll show you the cobbled octagon on the traditional site of the Market Cross. And there it is there, folks. Can you see it? That's the traditional site of the Market Cross. Now getting back to Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter Scott, 1771 to 1832, was born in Edinburgh and trained as a lawyer and was the county sheriff of Selkirk for 33 years until his death in 1832. He wrote many novels and poems, including over 20 historical novels, including Waverley and Ivanhoe. In 1813, he declined the offer of the Poet Laureateship of England. He used his wealth to construct his home, Abbotsford, near Selkirk, which is open to the public. Location of Selkirk is situated between two valleys, the Ettrick and the Yarrow, within the heart of the Scottish borders. The Ettrick and Yarrow rivers are both Tweed tributaries, with the Tweed being a very popular area for anglers all over the world for salmon and trout, also very popular with hill walkers and cyclists. The name Selkirk means the church of the Shields and is Anglo-Saxon in origin. This would suggest that there was a church present here from early Christian times. Historical facts prove that the town dated from the 1st decade AD, although modern Selkirk was built in the 1800s around the textile trade, which in the mid to late 1900s has given way to textile trade, the electronic sector. The current population is just under 6,000 and is mainly a manufacturing community for forestry and agriculture. I'll show you at the front of this monument. We have various trades. They ceremonially take part in the Selkirk common riding, casting their flags. You can read a little bit more about their history if you Google it, Selkirk common riding. There's some of them there. There's the fleshers. I don't know if you can see it. That's the merchants there. Weavers. And the hammermen. And there's a couple over there as well. But as I say, for a small town it is full of history. dating back to the King Charles IV, Charles V, etc., etc. Now we're coming to the Sir Walter Scott's courtroom. This is the seal of the board of the plaque. In this building from 1803 to 1832, Sir Walter Scott, as Sheriff of Selkirkshire, administered justice. So he'd travel every now and again, or every second day, third day, from his house home in Abbotsford to come into Selkirk and administer the justice. Another plaque. Dating 1535 to 1935, in commemoration of the granting of the Charter by King James V to the burgesses and community of the Royal Borough of Selkirk on 4th March 1535, renewing earlier charters destroyed by fire or war, also of the annual riding of the marches for the same period, unveiled by the Right Honourable the Earl of Hume, KT, on the 14th June 1935. Thomas Ballantyne was the provost then. So that's the plaque commemorating that time. If you ever visit the town, lots of these boards with information is reference to where you can go and where you can visit in the historical town. A suitor is the Scots language term for a shoemaker, a term affectionately given to the natives of Selkirk. Historically, the town was known for its shoe making, so much so Bonnet Prince Charlie had his army reshoed on their march south. It is unfortunate that he forgot to pay for them as they left. Visit a suitor today carrying out his work at Turnbull's Shoe Repairs on the High Street to experience the real craft. So there we go. And there's another plaque. Here's the ex-standard bearers. This one here. That's the ex-standard bearers. And the colonials. This plaque here is dedicated to the colonials. And it's the Halliwell's House Museum and Robson Gallery. Unfortunately, they're not open. I think it's because of the situation with the COVID-19. But that's it in there if you ever want to come and visit. It's up this close. Halliwell's House Museum and Robson Gallery. Admission is free. Now, going up the Kirk Wynd. Hume's Close. Don't know if you can see it. A lot of hills in this town. built on a hill, of course. Keep all the suitors fit. Commonwealth war graves are in this old kirkyard as well. This is probably one of the oldest cemeteries in Scotland. Okay, the old kirk. 1747 to 1861. The ruins of the former parish kirk of Selkirk are the last remains of a series of church buildings on this site, which go back to the 12th century. In 1747, a decision was taken that rather than repair the pre-Reformation church, which was literally falling down, it should be demolished and rebuilt. By the end of the year, Selkirk had a new kirk on this site. The 1747 building was smaller and less ambitious than its predecessors. Although there were fewer aisles, there were still lofts or galleries where the great and the good could take part in holy worship and took down on their fellow townspeople on the floor of the kirk. The fronts of the galleries were decorated with paintings and mottos representing the trades. These paintings were covered over in 1829 when the church was re-roofed and repainted. They were eventually thrown away when the building was vacated in 1861. The church bell, which still remains, was brought here from the town's toll booth in 1748. By the 1850s, the church had been repaired so many times that it was decided that the only solution was a new church on a different site. James Farquharson, who had become minister in 1857, set about raising money for a new church, and the congregation raised £600 themselves towards the cost. In 1861, the old building, which was no longer fit for worship, was vacated, the roof being removed in the same year. This brought to an end around 750 years of continuous worship on the site. The Selkirk Kirkyard, or short of the kirkyard. There are many interesting gravestones in the kirkyard, although many, especially the early ones from the 17th and 18th centuries, have deteriorated out of recognition. F.D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the USA, was directly related through his mother to the Murrays of Philip Hawke, a family whose associations with Selkirkshire began in 1461 with John D. Boravia. John Murray, who was killed in 1510, is claimed by some to have been the outlaw Murray, immortalised in the ballad of that time and that name. More information on the Murrays can be found in the Murray Isle. That's F.D. Roosevelt there. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1882 to 1945, President of the United States of America, 1932 to 45, whose maternal ancestors are commemorated in the churchyard. The oldest surviving stone can be found built into one of the walls of the ruined church. It portrays a full-length figure, and from the coat of arms and letters AIK, it can be deduced that it is probably a Scot of Harden who lived at Aikwood in the mid-16th century. The other stone, immediately to the left of the Aikwood stone, is to Patrick Fletcher, Deacon of the Weavers' Guild in 1676. Other stones and memorials in the ruins of the church and in the burial ground remember provosts, manufacturers, ministers and the ordinary people of Selkirk. The Anderson family, surgeons and politicians, including Thomas Anderson, 1810, the father-in-law of the African explorer Mungo Park, Alice Anderson, 1840, wife of Mungo Park, and Henry Scott Anderson, doctor and provost of Selkirk, 1868 to 1880. Thomas Craig Brown, 1844 to 1922, manufacturer, provost of Selkirk, 1889-1894, and author of the History of Selkirkshire. The Roberts family, provosts and manufacturers, the Lang family, lawyers and sheriff clerks. One memorial recalls Andrew Lang, 1844-1922, the writer, historian and mathematician. James Brown, 1832-1904, better known as the poet J.B. Selkirk. Ebenezer Clarkston, 1759-1844, Sir Walter Scott's doctor. Reverend George Lawson, 1749-1820, a much respected professor of divinity and minister in Selkirk town from 1771 to 1820. His sons and grandsons also became ministers in Selkirk. Andrew Park, 1773 to 1814, lawyer and brother of Mungo Park. Tom Scott, RSA, 1854 to 1927, watercolour artist, famous for his border landscapes. So there we go, folks. That's a little bit about the old kirk which we're in just now. If only these tombstones could speak, I wonder what they would say. It'd be very interesting if they could speak. Here we are, folks. Site of the kirk or the forest, where William Wallace was proclaimed Guardian of Scotland in 1298. In the Murray Isle of the present building lie the maternal ancestors of Franklin D. Roosevelt, 32nd President of the USA. We'll go in. This is the site of the Kirk of the Forest in here. As I say, a lot of the inscriptions are well weathered and worn out now, barely readable. The Murrays were a very prominent family, and they still are, back in the day and now. And there's the bell up there. See it? That's the famous Kirk bell. Very, very old gravestones, very old graves in this cemetery. So there we are, folks. The old forest kirk. If you ever get a chance to come to Selkirk, the Selkirk Common Riding is a very, very interesting festival, and again, a lot of history attached to it. A great place for horses. You can understand why the kings used to come here to hunt and jump onto their horses and go up there and put an arrow through a few deer and what have you. You can understand why it's so popular. I mean, it's full of forest, full of forests and what have you. You up there to Kirkwine. But getting back to a town associated with a lot of famous people. Yes, for a small town, it's been well acquainted with famous people. David I, 1080 to 1153, established an abbey, Selkirk Abatis, in 1120, believed to be made of wood which was later moved to form fertile land in Kelso. James V, 1512 to 1542. In 1535, Royal Charter granted in respect of Flodden conflict. James Brown, J.B. Selkirk, much regarded Scottish poet. Andrew Lang, 1844 to 1912, poet and essayist. F.D. Roosevelt, US President, 1933 to 1945, descendant of the Murrays of Philip Hoch. William Wallace, 1272 to 1305, declared Guardian of Scotland in Selkirk's Old Kirk, which we've just went up to visit. Munro Park, 1771 to 1806, born in Selkirk, famous for the exploration of West Africa and the charting of the River Niger. Tom Scott, RSA, 1854 to 1927, born in Selkirk, highly collectible watercolour painter. Sir Walter Scott, 1771-1832, Scottish novelist, dispensed justice in Selkirk. James Hogg, 1770 to 1835, a Scottish poet and essayist, born Ettrick, Selkirk, otherwise known as the Ettrick Shepherd. He was born in Selkirk. Robert Burns, 1759 to 1796, wrote his epistle to Willie Creech in the Forest Inn. So, a few famous people there that are associated with the Royal and Ancient Borough of Selkirk. Now I'm going to take you over to the Pant Well. Now folks, the Pant Well. The Pant Well was originally constructed in 1706 to improve the quality of the town's water supply. In 1715 a trough, a pant, was added to catch the overflow, and in 1728 a dial, statue and town coat of arms were incorporated. That's the Pant Well. Town coat of arms up there, but it's pretty weathered and seasoned with age. The structure was rebuilt in 1898 with an image of Queen Victoria displayed above the fountain, and included the coat of arms from the original one. On the left side of the well are the names that fought in the Boer War. The names of the local men who fought in the Boer War. That's a plaque dedicated to them on the side of the Pant Well. It's a better view of it from a distance there, the whole thing. It's the town's arms in across the road. 1876. That's a pretty old pub, that. It's been there all that time and still standing. Town's arms in. A few stories told in there. Now this plaque here, can you see it? This plaque marks the site of the house where the Marquis of Munro spent the night before the Battle of Philip Hoch in September 1645. He and his cavalry were quartered in Selkirk, but his cannon and infantry were across the valley near Philip Hoch House. Next day, after he was defeated, he fled while his Irish infantry, with their wives and children whose safety had been assured, were all killed. This was a revengeful act by General Leslie's men, and Selkirk people played no part in this dreadful massacre. So there we are, Marquis of Montrose. This is where he slept before going off to war, going off to battle. Now folks, we're at Burgh's Close. This is it here. Burgh's Close. Up the Burgh's Close here, it gives you an idea of how the 18th century Selkirk was laid out long before the houses were converted to their present uses. It was named after the Burgh family who lived there in the early 1880s. The building after the town arms is thought to be one of the oldest in the town. Plain in style, with a steep roof which suggests it may have been thatched. Okay, that's Burgh's Close up there, see? Right, goes right up there and shows you all the original housing. Now round about here somewhere, the town's original Freemasons' Hall, where Sir Walter Scott was a member. On the same site once stood the cafe used by the French Napoleonic prisoners for social gatherings and orchestral concerts until their return home in 1814. You are now entering the marketplace, and we've already seen the Pantwell. So a lot of French prisoners, Napoleon's time, they stayed in Selkirk for a while, till the end of the war, and then they returned back to France. The name Selkirk is probably of Anglo-Saxon origin, but maybe even earlier, from the Selgovi tribe who lived here in Roman times. It dates from at least the 8th century AD, and there was a church here from early Christian times. We also know it was the capital of Ettrick Forest, an ancient royal hunting ground. The borough was famed for shoemakers, and in 1745 received its most famous order for footwear to supply 2,000 pairs of boots for Bonnie Prince Charlie's army. Unfortunately for the Selkirk shoemakers, his army was defeated and the bill was never paid. Later still, Selkirk became a prosperous textile manufacturing town, originally relying on water power from the River Ettrick. Tartans and tweeds were exported worldwide, and mile upon mile of military uniform cloth, which was made in Selkirk, was supplied to the troops in both world wars. Although there is little early recorded history of the town, the hunting lodge developed into a castle rebuilt in 1302 at a cost of £1,372, 13 shillings and 10 pence, and was an important seat of Scotland's 12th century kings. Only the mound where it once stood now remains. Earl David, who later became King David I, established an abbey in Selkirk in 1113, possibly at nearby Lindeen Kirk, bringing 13 monks from Tyrone Monastery in France. The abbey was moved to Kelso in 1128. Selkirk's royal charter was confirmed by King James V in 1535-36 in recognition of the role played at Flodden by the men of Selkirk, and after all previous charters had been lost. The lands granted were extensive at about 11,200 acres, 4,550 hectares. The men of Selkirk would constantly have to check all was well by riding the boundaries to make sure they remain secure and accurately positioned. Both Flodden and the boundaries or marches still play vital roles in the annual common riding, which takes place every year on the second Friday after the first Monday in June. Medieval and early modern Selkirk was a small, quiet town centred on the marketplace. The textile industry boom of the 19th century brought radical change to Selkirk, with the coming of the mills, with the population more than quadrupling between 1791 and 1891. The riverside area expanded to include mills such as Ettrick, Langley, Yarrow and Forest, enlarging the borough to many times its previous size. The A-listed Ettrick Spinning and Weaving Mill has been conserved and converted to provide high quality business accommodation. Now the town hall. There. Originally built as a courthouse in 1803 to replace the toll booth. The spire is 110 foot, 33 metres high to its weather vane. The bronze plaque beside the main door dates from 1935 and marks the 400th anniversary of the town charter. I showed you that earlier. Every evening at 8 p.m. the curfew bell rings in the town hall. This custom dates from the days when houses were thatched and all domestic fires had to be doused or covered to prevent the unattended home fires setting light to the thatch at night. The courtroom inside is where Sir Walter Scott dispensed justice from 1799 for over 30 years. As Sheriff Deputy, Scott's role was essentially that of a county judge. After it ceased to be a court, it became the town hall, and the Borough Council met there until the abolition in 1974. The courtroom now houses a fascinating museum containing a lot of local information, which includes Scott's associations with the area, as his contemporaries. So there we go, folks, a little bit into the Sir Walter Scott's courtroom. Now, a little bit about the Selkirk Silver Arrow here. The Selkirk Silver Arrow was a prize inaugurated by the Royal Borough of Selkirk in the year 1660 and was competed for annually by local archers using longbows. The competition ceased in 1674 and the arrow was thereafter safely stored in the Selkirk Charter chest, where it was known to be in 1880. Sir Walter Scott, the noted writer and Sheriff of Selkirk, unearthed the largely forgotten arrow and arranged for the Royal Company of Archers to come to Selkirk and compete for it against local archers. They won it and took it to Edinburgh. The borough requested it back in 1835 and the Royal Company of Archers agreed to deliver it up, but never handed it back. In 1985, the original letter from Selkirk commissioning the making of the arrow in July 1660 was discovered among old papers rescued from a bonfire in 1940. The letter recounted how Annie Egyptian, a gypsy, was caught trying to sell a £1/4 of silver plate to a Selkirk merchant, but then escaped, leaving the silver behind, which was thereupon sent to Edinburgh and used to make the arrow. The Royal Company of Archers agreed in 2006 to share the display of the arrow with the winners' medallions in its elegant silver frame, and it can be seen in the courthouse in the marketplace during the summer. Thus, nearly 350 years after it was made, the arrow was returned to its original home, and another page has been added to Selkirk's unique and fascinating history. So that's the story about the Silver Arrow, Selkirk Silver Arrow. The marketplace is dominated by the Scott Monument by Handyside Ritchie, dated 1839, and was erected on the site of the old toll booth, town hall and prison. This area would have been the focal point of the medieval borough, where the long-lost market cross would have seen proclamations, punishments and markets. Medieval records show meat, fish, butter, cheese and salt were all traded. Fragments of the market cross may have been incorporated into the Pantwell of 1898. So all that went on back there and then at this point here. The saying Yinsa Suitor, Aya Suitor, and it's written here on the pavement. I'll let you see it. Okay, Jinsa Suter, Aya Suter. Now, take you along the high street. Now folks, we've come to the County Hotel. Again, a very, very old building. County Hotel. County Hotel, formerly the Grapes Inn, a good example of an early 19th century coaching inn. It was frequented by Sir Walter Scott and was a meeting place of the Forest Club. The site was visited by many famous men, including James Hogg, Robert Southey, the Duke of Wellington and John Wesley. The great Hungarian revolutionary hero Louis Kossuth, 1802-1894. Also stayed there briefly in 1856. While on a fundraising speaking tour of Scotland, above the portico is the life-size statue of Red Dog Suter, a successful greyhound owned in the 19th century by the proprietor. Inside the hotel is a ballroom with musicians' gallery. Okay, folks, that's the County Hotel. Wonder if you can see the Red Dog. I'll go and see if I can show you. So, it's housed a few famous people, the county. Yes, there's the Red Dog there. Can you see it? That's the Red Dog. I'll see if I can get further up for you. And that's it there. Here is the house, folks, the building. It was here that the pioneer African explorer Munro Park was apprenticed to Dr. Anderson, courting and marrying his daughter. This corner is also the site of the memorial stone. Now behind me, folks, is the statue to Munro Park, erected in 1859. Was designed and sculpted by Andrew Curry in 1905. The fine relief bronze panels by Galashiel sculptor Thomas Clapperton were added to depict Park's travels in the Niger, and in 1913 the corner life-size figures of peace, war, slavery and home life in that region added further enhancement. Park was born in 1771 in the Yarrow Valley, a few miles away. In 1795 he sailed to the Gambia to lead a team exploring for the course of the Niger. In 1779 and 1797 he returned to Scotland, having managed to follow the course of the Niger River for almost 400 miles. Although he returned to practice medicine in the borders at Peebles, the lure of Africa proved too strong, and he returned to lead his final ill-fated exploration in 1805. After much hardship and with few of his company remaining alive. In Bausa, in what is now Nigeria, the account reads: the people began to attack, throwing lances, pikes, arrows and stones. Mr. Park defended himself for a long time. 2 of his slaves at the stern of the canoe were killed. They threw everything they had in the canoe into the river and kept firing, but being overpowered by numbers and fatigue and no probability of escaping, Mr. Park took hold of one of the white men and jumped into the water and was drowned in the stream attempting to escape. So that was the end for Munro Park. He was ambushed by some of the natives, and he was drowned. Now there's a splendid monument behind me, erected in memory of him. That's the Munro Park monument. I'll show you around it, give you a look. It's sculpted in bronze there. This is his period out there when he was out in Africa. He's been given a drink there by some of the native women. These sidings as well. Shows you what they were like back on those days, the Africans. I don't know if you can see this with the sun. It's a pretty strong sun. I'll do my best for you. I'll read it out best way I can. This inscription is to commemorate the death of Munro Park's companions during his second expedition, Alexander Anderson, MD, Selkirk. Died at Sandin on the Niger, 28th October 1805, and George Scott Singley, Selkirk, died August 1805. Also, Thomas Park, son of Munro Park, died in Akwambo, Africa in 1827, while endeavouring to obtain trace of his distinguished father. So that plaque there is in memory of all that. It's well made. And that's Munro on his horse, travelling through the jungles with his servants. There's another plaque round the other side here for you. Munro Park, born at Foulshield, Selkirkshire, 10th September 1771. Killed at Bausa on the Niger, Africa, 1805. So that's a little bit of a commemoration for Munro Park there. And of course he's standing at the top of the monument. Okay, had a view of it. Very fitting for him, I think. He achieved quite a lot. Son of Selkirk. I mentioned J.B. Selkirk there back in the market square, and this is the plaque commemorating him. J.B. Selkirk, the famous poet. That's him there. J.B. Selkirk, James Brown, 1832 to 1904. Poet and man of letters, author of Selkirk After Flodden. Erected by admirers of his works, 1931. It says here that Thomas Clapperton was the maker of the plaque. J.B. Selkirk. James Brown. We're coming towards the Victoria Hall, and this is where I'm going to show you Fletcher. Tell you a little bit more about Fletcher and the Battle of Flodden. Now, the statue behind me, folks, is the famous, one of the most famous and evocative in the Borders, the Flodden Memorial. The renowned Border sculptor Thomas J. Clapperton was commissioned in 1913, the 400th anniversary of the Battle of Flodden, to design the bronze Fletcher Memorial, dedicated to the Selkirk men who fell in the conflict. According to local legend, Fletcher was the only man out of 80 to return to his hometown after the battle. He arrived carrying a captured English flag and unable to speak the terrible news of the defeat. He raised the flag high above his head before sweeping it low like a scythe, to show that all were slain. This poignant act is remembered every year at the Selkirk Common Riding in the final ceremony of the casting of the colours, when the standard bearers in turn take their flags and cast them in a prescribed pattern to the old tune of Up With the Suitors. Up with the Suitors, O Selkirk. After the last flag is cast, the lament, the lilting, is played, known throughout the world as the Floors of the Forest. Fletcher. There he is, only man to return out of nearly 80 Selkirk men. And there's a plaque down below it. This monument, embodying the spirit of the Selkirk tradition and erected to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the Battle of Flodden Field, was unveiled by the Earl of Rosebery, KG, KT, 1913. Andrew Lusk Allen was the provost then. All part of Selkirk's history. And that's Fletcher. And behind me, folks, is the Victoria Halls. This just lies behind Fletcher, the Flodden Monument. Now, Victoria Halls, it's a Renaissance style red sandstone it was built with, whose foundation stone was laid in 1895 and was paid for by public subscription. It was completed 2 years later in Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee year. The nearby impressive fountain, an example of Victorian flamboyance, was transported from the old Philip Hawke house when it was being demolished and has recently been renovated. I'll take you down to see the fountain. So that's the Victoria Halls. A lot of the townspeople use it regularly for different various functions, and this is the famous Victorian fountain that I mentioned. Give you, obviously there's no water in it just now at the present moment, but that's it there. Well sculpted. And here you have a plaque, folks. On the 7th September 2013, this garden was officially opened by the Duke of Buccleuch and Queensberry, KV EDL, in commemoration of the 500th anniversary of the Battle of Flodden. This plaque is dedicated to the fortitude of the women and children of Selkirk bereaved by war. That's the main plaque up there. It looks very, very impressive. Flodden 500. 1513 to 2013. And here's the garden here. Made a nice garden there in memory of the 500th anniversary. The anniversary of the Battle of Flodden. So it's pretty new, this garden, it's not too old. Here we are, folks. This is the Victorian splendour of the parish church, dated 1880, which was built in an early Gothic style with a spire 130 foot high. The building was originally known as the Lawson Memorial Church in memory of a famous local cleric. Although Selkirk was originally a small town, by the boom textile years at the end of the 19th century, it was served by 9 churches, when it had once only required 2. So there we are, folks. Victorian splendour. Of the Lawson Memorial Church, the parish church behind us. Quite a high spiral there as well. You see it? The 1887 Masonic Lodge is in dressed sandstone and was built to replace an earlier lodge. The material is not local and reflects an age of improved transport when masons were no longer restricted to local material. In contrast, the earlier cottage opposite was built before the use of the dressed stone and has no cornerstones, so would be much older than other houses in the street. The roof has a much higher pitch at the gable end on the left of the cottage, and this shows it was originally thatched. A new slate roof would have been built in the 19th century, when borough law outlawed thatched roofs as a fire hazard. The present red sandstone Masonic Lodge was built in the 19th century to replace the earlier lodge in the marketplace. One of the first lodges in Scotland, It was originally called Lodge Number 1, but the lodge in Kilwinning claimed to be the first. So the compromise was that both then became called Lodge Number 1, 2. The story is told that Robert Burns, the national poet and a mason himself, on a visit to Selkirk with a better dressed companion, asked to be let in to the earlier lodge to stay for the night. He was scrutinised, was judged to be too scruffy, and not being recognised was refused admission. He was not best pleased. Yes, he wouldn't be well pleased either, the bard. So that's it, folks, the Masonic Lodge. Well, folks, we're up near Castle Street now, and the site of the castle and the centre of power, the wooden castle, was occupied by both sides during the Wars of Independence, with most of the construction done by the English. The site of the current Century Now housing estate, that's it behind me and all around here, Century Now housing estate, was where a lookout was posted in Gallows Now. Across the road and up the hill was where local offenders were hanged for the entire town to see. Let's see if I can get you up this hill. The Southport in front of you, in front of me I should say, was once the fortified gateway guarding the old road to Hawick in the south and St Boswell's in the east, known under various names. That's behind me right up that hill. The most evocative remains Foul Bridge Port because of the terrible smells from the nearby tan pits where the leather was cured for shoemaking. It was demolished in 1767. This area of Selkirk is now a 1960s modern redevelopment on the site of the old medieval town. It won a Civic Trust Award in 1971. Many old and interesting buildings once stood here. And this is the road, Castle Street, leading on that road behind me, see? That's Castle Street. And at the very top of that street, the medieval castle there was there. Castle Street leading to Castle Terrace, Langdykes. That's the plaque there. Now across the road we're going to see a cobbler or a suitor. Most of the townspeople were cobblers way back in the day anyway. And pikemen fighting flood. So that was the Selkirk Regis, or the Regis, that we've just seen a few moments ago. Behind me is a small statue of the suitor shoemaker, high on a house wall. Shoemaking was Selkirk's main trade before the arrival of the textile industry, and the Shoemakers Guild was founded in 1609, only being disbanded in the 1960s. So that's the suitor up there. The shoemaking trade lived on until 1975, when John Guthrie, the last shoemaker, retired, but Selkirk remains full of suitors, since it is the proud name given to the town's natives. Okay, so John Guthrie was the last shoemaker. Quite a history of shoemaking, Selkirk. Here we are, folks. This is the site where the Forest Inn used to be. In 1787, Robert Burns stayed here in the Forest Inn, which once stood on this site, and wrote his epistle to William Creech. It was said he received an unfriendly welcome from other drinkers and passed a solitary evening writing the letter in verse to his Edinburgh publisher. The row of houses, which included the inn, was demolished in 1878 when the road was widened. Jumping up and touching the marble plaque is supposed to bring you luck. So a lot of the locals and anybody that knows about this, they jump up, give it a touch, and with a little bit of luck they might win the lottery or something that's going to bring them luck. Okay, so that was Robert Burns's his night in Selkirk. Now across the road is the Haining, a privately owned mansion once the seat of the Pringles of Haining, down there. About 300 yards from the gate, replacing an earlier one, the present house was built from 1794, with alterations in 1819. There is a pleasant walk in the woods by the loch, which the owner permits the public to use. The site of the old Selkirk castle lies in the grounds, at the highest point, about 200 yards towards the town from the house. The area has never been excavated archaeologically. The site was excavated recently to study archaeological remains. So that's the Haining, folks, behind me. It's the Haining wall. That's the entrance to the Haining, folks, behind me. I'll go up to the mouth of the entrance and let you take a look inside. So it's very heavily forested. That's the Haining. A beautiful scent of forest. You know, if you could bottle this stuff, you'd make a fortune selling it as a freshener. All forested. And that's the entrance behind me. Now behind me, folks, Selkirk Prison. At the arched gateway on the right is the stone entrance to the old Selkirk Prison, which was built in 1803 to replace the toll booth. It was bought in 1886 by local historian Thomas Craig Brown, who converted it and added a reading room. He presented the building to Selkirk for use as a library, and this remains its current use. Above the gateway is a carving of the Burgh seal depicting the Virgin and Child and the building, which would represent the long-lost Selkirk Abbey. The present Sheriff Courthouse has been in use since 1870 and also served as the county buildings before county councils were abolished in 1975. The rope decoration above the main door was carved by a local stonemason. The basement originally housed the police station, cells and the sergeant's accommodation, while the building was linked to the jail by an underground passage now bricked up. So there we are, folks. Sheriff Courthouse. Here we have the Selkirk War Memorial. The wreaths on the Remembrance Parade on the 11th of November are laid here. And that's it. All the soldiers that lost their lives from Selkirk. in grateful remembrance of these men from Selkirk who laid down their lives in the Second World War. And that's the plaque there for them. Now folks, just a word about the swan or the black swan. I couldn't see the plaque for you, but I can give you a little bit of information as reference to it. Opposite the plaque is the fine stone frontage of a building with an engraving of a swan. This was the site of the hotel known both as the Swan and the Black Swan, where French officers who were prisoners of war were billeted during the Napoleonic War. The two shop fronts below are decorated in their doorways with Edwardian tiles by Duncan of Glasgow, with the initials of the Buttercup Dairy Company, and then the Butcher J.I. Waters, whose name is on the glass door, and initials on the mosaic entrance floor to the second shop. So that's a little bit of info as reference to the Swan, or the Black Swan is the other name for it. And the other one I couldn't get hold of for you was the Tom Scott bust, which was the Southern Reporter's grounds. They're all closed up because of this lockdown carry-on. Now, the Southern Reporter, Selkirk's weekly newspaper, which was first issued in 1855, although the business outgrew this site, the stone engraving above the door remains. A memorial to the paper's founder, George Lewis, who owned a grocer's business in the town. The building next door was the birthplace of the artist Tom Scott, RSA, 1854 to 1927, and is commemorated by the bronze bust high on the wall. Scott was the son of a local tailor who studied art in Edinburgh. He went on to become a watercolourist whose paintings are much prized today. He is buried in his hometown at the Old Kirk in Kirkwynd. That was the famous prized painter, an artist. So that's us folks. This has been a visit to Selkirk, a very historical town, and letting you see a few of the pointers and historical places that we visited. So, signing off, and hope to see you on the next journey, and take care. Bye for now.